Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know when you're watching this, but wherever you are, have a good one. Whenever you are, have a good one. This is just something that Zach and I are going to do today. I'm sure that you can see him up there on your screen. We decided, yeah, I say you wave to everybody if they can see you there. That's good. So this is just kind of an off the cuff conversation that we're going to have today. I really wanted you all as Zach's spiritual family now to get to know him a little bit, hear a little bit more about his life and his experience. And I don't know, this is something that we've talked about doing during this quarantine time, just sort of more informal. It's not a service, not a devotional, just two friends talking. And we thought that maybe that could be an encouragement to you. Because let's be honest, you've probably already gone through your Netflix queue. You've probably you probably already rewatched your favorite movies like 3 times. You need something else right now, and we hope that maybe you would do us the honor. I don't know, maybe nobody will listen to this, and that's fine too. We're going to do it anyway. But if you have time to watch it, then we hope that it would be a blessing to you as you do. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and get started. So Zach, do you want to say anything to anybody before we get going here?
I just can't reiterate enough how blessed we feel to be here and be a part of the KCC family. We are longing for the day that we can be back and uh, and doing services in person. We can't wait to meet everyone. It's definitely been hard moving here, and then all of a sudden everything's shutting down, and it's like we feel like we moved to a new place, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, well, we don't
Yeah.
we don't know anyone.
Yeah, you've had exactly one in-person service here, and it was your tryout. It was your
Yes, it
tryout
was the
weekend.
interview.
And then your first Sunday was, I think, our second week, maybe third
Hmm.
week of doing all online. And so
Yep.
one of the reasons why I thought it'd be cool to get together like this and record it for people is like, there's so much of being a church family and being a pastor. It's not the hour on Sunday morning. It's not
Hmm.
that service that you do. It's people talking to you in the hallway.
Yeah.
It's during the week, and like you've got your Oasis Bible study, our seniors Bible study on Wednesdays, and maybe you
Yeah.
go out to say hello to them, and then they get to know you that way, right? Everybody's asking you
Absolutely.
questions, and that's really how relationships form. It's in those in between times. It's not in any
Hmm.
kind of formal setting. And so I just thought that we need people to get to know you, because I've gotten to know
Yeah.
you since you've been here, and I love you, and I just appreciate you and Candace and the kids so much. And I want them to be able to have a little bit of that, even though they're sitting at home. So
Awesome.
so this is not. I want to be clear to you. You already have the job. This is not an interview.
Sweet.
Although it's going to sound, there are some questions that sound like interview questions. All right, it's very much
Uh-huh.
questions that we asked. When we were talking to you about possibly coming and joining us. Questions
Yeah.
like, hey, tell us about yourself and your life. There's questions like that. But I just want you to
Uh-huh.
feel no pressure. There's no committee that's going to watch this. That's all in the past. So yeah, okay, all right. So but I think it would be good if you would, tell people a little bit about just your life personally. However long you want to take is fine. I'll just sit back and listen. But just kind of tell us a
Okay.
little bit about like your life journey. How you came to faith, how you met Candace, all those good things. I think that'd be really great for people to hear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I've been very blessed, very fortunate to grow up in a household with two parents who absolutely loved the Lord, and it's something that I think sometimes it's easy to take for granted when I look at other people's lives, and I especially when I got into youth ministry. And I started seeing all of the broken families and all the kids that came from broken homes, and kind of realizing, wow, I had two parents all throughout my childhood who loved me and loved the Lord and raised me up in the Lord. And it was just definitely something to cherish. Definitely something that I really, really, really cherish in my heart. And so I guess I was about 3 years old when I told my mom I wanted to ask Jesus into my heart. we were at my dad's work, kind of like having a picnic at dad's work, and he had left the room, and my mom said, I turned to her and said, Mom, I want to ask Jesus into my heart. And she kind of like had that panic moment where it's like, I don't want to mess this up as a parent. Like, what do I say? What do I do? And she was like, okay,
I
well,
know that moment.
um, yeah. It was like, she said, all right, buddy, well, I guess you can repeat after me. And she started, and I said, no, Mom, I have to do this. And I apparently launched into the sinner's prayer, launched into my little 3-year-old version of Jesus, I need you to live in my heart. And my mom was like, yeah, I don't know if it stuck. He's 3, 4 years old. I'm not sure. And apparently, I guess the next week we were outside playing in the yard, and I just ran up to her and gave her a hug and said, Mommy, I love Jesus so much. And it's definitely been a process of sanctification since then. I don't think no one's ever going to be perfect this side of eternity. No one's ever going to
Yeah,
um,
except our wives. Yeah,
fair,
yeah,
except our wives, who,
yeah.
if you're watching, you're perfect and amazing and never do anything wrong. Um, but this side of eternity, there's never going to be a moment, I think, or there shouldn't be at least, where we're like, yep, I've arrived, I've made it, I am the Christian that I want to be. Not to say that we should be self-deprecating or always down on ourselves, for sure, because we were bought with a price. God looked on us and said that we were worth it. And
But
so I
there's
think that
humility.
definitely
There's
there's
humility that
yeah
we need to
but
have.
there is
Yeah.
humility
Mhm.
there. And so um I was always very musical, even from a young age. I started taking piano lessons when I was in the first grade. My parents were like, you're going to take um piano lessons. I think my parents were always grateful that piano stuck, because my sister came along. My sister is 5 years younger than me, and she's actually adopted from China. I was the coolest kid in my kindergarten class. Yeah, I went to kindergarten for a week and then left for 2 weeks and went to Jiangxi province in China and
Wow,
picked up my baby sister.
that's super cool.
Eh, yeah, it was really neat. And
And
so
how
I
old
think
were you then? How old were you
I was
again?
I was 5 and a half.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow, that's awesome.
yeah. So we picked her up, and it's so funny. She's just one of those people who never quite made up her mind when she was a kid on what she wanted to do. She was like, I want to play piano, I want to play guitar, I want to play basketball, I want to play volleyball, I want to play soccer, I want to play flag football, I want to play. And it was just like one thing after another, and they were constantly just like, because once I left the house and she was like 13, 14, it was just like, all right, try whatever you want to do, like kind of do this. But when I started out with piano, I think my parents said they were so glad that I stuck with it, because that was like, they bought a piano for a good deal and were like, this is all we can do, so we hope you like this. You're stuck with it. And I ended up playing piano, doing classical piano lessons from first grade through 8th grade. And right around the beginning of middle school, 6th grade, was when my parents felt God calling us to move to a different church. I had actually grown up Methodist. We had been in a large Methodist church in the Raleigh area for the majority of my childhood. And I remember, just especially in the worship, because granted, 90s and early 2000s worship looked much different. At least worship music looked much different than it does today. But I always remember feeling like,
I think of the '90s and 2000s era, the early 2000s worship music as like the
uh
Sahara Desert that we had to go through to get to the promised land. You know,
yes,
it was
yes,
because
it
I
was.
love the music that we have today, the new
Mhm.
worship songs that are coming out. Like a lot of it's such great doctrine and messages and teaching in them, and they're just great musically and
Yeah,
theologically. And I feel like a lot of those like late '90s, like early 2000s era, it was sort of like, oh man, we're just
it was a little
wandering in
touch
the
and go.
desert for a little bit.
Yeah, it was rough. But I always remember, like, as a kid, thinking like, I feel like there's more to worship. There's more to, like, I felt like, like you'd always watch that one person when you were a kid who would raise their hands in worship. And there was that guy in church, and I always felt like, I want to do that, but I don't want to do that, and I want to do that, but I don't want to do that. And we ended up going to a church that was non-denominational, much more, I guess, charismatic, you would say, a little more free in worship. And I just fell in love as a 12-year-old kid. Just fell in love even more so with worship and worship music than I ever had before. Very quickly, the youth group like the 18-year-old youth group worship leader guy, found out that I played piano, and he grabbed me and two other of my buddies, the three of us, and he was like, "Hey, I'm graduating high school soon, and you guys are going to be the next generation of worship leaders in this church." And we were like,
He told you that right
uh,
away, like
I,
as he grabbed
with
you and got you in the band.
within probably 6 to 8 months of me being at the church, yeah, I had
Wow.
started going to the youth group and stuff because it was like I was 12 years old. I was like sixth grade. I could be in the youth group now, and it was so cool. And I remember it was towards the end of my sixth grade year, going into seventh grade, that he grabbed me, Timmy, and Tanner, and was like, "You guys." I played keys, Tanner played guitar, and Timmy was a drummer. And he was like, "You guys are going to be the next generation of worship leaders. So come to the church, and we're going to kind of like teach you guys." And up until then, I'd only played like sheet music, like Bach, Brahms, Beethoven, that kind of stuff. And so they just kind of slapped a chord chart down in front of me and were like, "Okay, play it." And I was like, "Wait,
And
what
how
do you
did
want
that
me to
go?
do?" It did not go well. I felt like a failure. I was like sitting there like, "Wait, you expect me to?" I said, "I know the note A, but like, how do you want me?" He's like, "Just play like the 1 3 5, the full chord." And I was like, and I just hit it. And I was like, "So now what do I do?" He's like, "I don't know, just like improvise, do whatever you want to do." And I did not do it well for a long time. It They ended up kind of creating a middle school band after he left, and one of the youth leaders kind of took us under and kind of led with us. And by the time I got up into high school, I was leading with the high school band and kind of like playing keys, and I did not sing. I mean, I sang in the shower maybe, but not even in the car because I didn't want my parents to hear me. I was not a confident singer. And the it was funny. There was like that older, like that older cool guy who graduates high school but then comes back to help with the youth, and he's like a young college age kid. He was one of our drummers, and he every time we would play together, he would go, "Zach, you need to get a microphone. You're gonna lead worship one of these days." And one of my friend's older sisters was saying the same thing. She was like, "Yeah, Zach, you need to sing," because she was singing on the team. She's like, "You need to sing." And I was like, "No, guys, I don't sing. I'll never sing." And they still give me a hard time about it to this day because they're like, "I remember when you said I'll never sing," and I did. I was fully confident that I would never sing into a microphone, and I was very happy with that. But God didn't. That wasn't His plan. So it was a night that our worship leader for the church was leading with us, and we had kind of like a scattered youth team that would just, sometimes they'd show up, sometimes they wouldn't. And one night, the guy who never comes, who plays acoustic, showed up for practice. And so the worship leader was like, "Okay, well, I'll play bass. I'll hop on bass." And so he hopped on bass, and then the guy who never shows up, who plays bass, showed up. And and he's like, Josh, who is still a really, really good friend of mine to this day. He was the worship leader who literally, at this point, threw me into the deep end and told me to swim. He just looked at me. He said, "All right, Zach, you're leading tonight." And 16, 15-year-old me had a mini stroke in the middle of our youth building as I anticipated having to sing in front of all my peers. I was perfectly fine hiding behind my keyboard, but I did not want to sing. And it was probably a little rough. I remember there was a solid. You remember the song "I Am Free"? They're
Oh
like,
yeah,
"I am free to
the dance.
run."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. My voice cracked on that song so many times throughout high school. Like my best man in my weddings, like I got married in 2017, so 7 years after I graduated high school, and he was still making fun of me at my wedding for my
For
voice
that
cracking. That's
that
how.
performance.
No, no, it was that performance, and then probably every other time we sang that song, my voice would crack. It was a
Okay.
50-50 shot. Like my voice would most likely crack, and it was right at the I of "I am free." So I'd be like, "I am free."
Yeah. That reminds me, this Sunday, I really feel like the Lord's laying on my heart that we
I
need to
don't
do
think
I Am
so.
Free. We need to do I Am Free as part of the service. So
I
I'm your
I have not led
boss,
that song
and
intentionally for a
you have to do what
long
you
time.
have to do what I tell you to do.
Dang it.
So we're just gonna go with. No,
I
that's
have
fine. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
intentionally intentionally not led that song for a very long time because of that. But I so yeah, I started kind of leading throughout youth group and loved it. Just absolutely fell in love with leading worship, with being in nights of worship, and it's something that I grew to love. But I never really thought like this is what I'm going to do with my life. I always thought I was going to go to college. I was going to get my graphic arts and imaging technology degree from Appalachian State, where I went for a year. And I went there, and there's some people that probably should take gap years, and I was one of those people. I was not ready at 18 years old to just jump into high school, or into college rather, from high school. And I think I had like your core classes, like your math, science, history, English, the first semester, and I'm really good at math and English, and I'm really not great at science and history. And so I kind of half showed up, half didn't show up, came in for the midterms and the final, and I failed history and science, and I got a B in math and English. And my dad wasn't too happy with that one, and so he was like, let's try this semester. So I retook history, got a C second semester, and the second semester is when I had my first class for my major, like the first class to go into the graphic arts program. And what I didn't realize was it wasn't a requirement. It wasn't like, hey, you have to have a portfolio to get into the graphic arts um, program, but it was like almost expected that you should. And I did not. I was just coming there because I wanted to learn graphic arts, but they the first day of the first class, it was like, all right, like yeah, let's grab your portfolios and what you've created, and let's look through them, and then let's start on your first project. And I was sitting there like, I'm sorry, portfolio? Like I was supposed to. I had never I had never really done Photoshop, Illustrator, any of that before. I was just very interested in learning, and I literally felt like a little kid being explained to by a doctor how to what was wrong. They were like, well, you just need to go here and do this, and I was like, can you explain that to me like I'm 5? And it I tried so hard in that class, and I ended up failing, and it was one of the lower points of my young adulthood. I remember getting my final grades and just being completely defeated. And I called my dad and I was like, what am I going to do? Like, this was what I was going to do with my life. Like, I felt like this was, you know, I was
You
going
kind
to,
of you were kind of banking on that, huh?
yeah, I was banking on becoming a graphic arts and imaging technology major and doing graphic design work the rest of my life. And it's funny because now I actually do enjoy kind of doing graphic design and stuff on Canva and different places. But in the moment, I was feeling really defeated, and my dad was just like, "Come on home, and we'll figure it out." And it's funny because that whole year, I had gone up there, and a good friend of ours pastors a church up there, and I had led worship with the college ministry for that church, and I had helped lead ministry a couple times a month for the church, like lead worship rather. And I had just loved it. I had loved every second of it. And as I was talking, my mom's super wise, and my mom kind of talked to me as we were debriefing kind of my first year of college, and she said, did you really enjoy being in school up there? I was like, yeah, I loved it. Like I loved all of it. And she was like, no, 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 no. Did you enjoy being in school up there, or did you enjoy being in ministry up there? And I was like, huh. And I started thinking, because I was, the more I thought about it, I was like, the fondest memories I have, the most treasured memories I had were the times that I was either at the church or doing something with the college ministry. And my dad was like, okay, well, let's think. Do you want to, go back to college and not screw up? And I was like, thanks, Dad, thanks. And he was like, you could, if you don't want to do that, we could do community college for a little bit, transfer back in. You could just go get a job. You could work for a little bit, whatever you. And I was like, every option he was giving me, I was just like, no, no, I don't really like. I don't feel like I want to go back, but I also don't know. Like, I feel like that's my only option. And then he said, what about School of Worship? And I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah. Now, how had he heard of School of Worship? Is that through the church? Like, do they
So
have a partnership
our
with
yeah
them or what?
our well no our worship leader at the time had gone there. So the guy who I had been working with for the last couple of years, his name was Brian Capano, um, good friend of mine, and he had gone to New Life School of Worship, and that's where our church had kind of, because once you go through that program, they list all their worship leader graduates on their website, and if churches are looking for a worship leader, they can go there and look, and it'll post, like, if you're looking for a job and you graduated from there, they'll kind of put you up on their website as like a featured
Okay, yeah,
worship
yeah.
leader that churches can approach. And so that's how they had found him. And so my dad was like, well, Brian went to school of worship. He really loved it. And and like my mom had said, she was like, I think you enjoyed being in ministry more than you actually enjoyed being at school. And, if I was actually doing something that I truly loved, then it wouldn't be super difficult. So we started the application process way late. We applied later than we ever should have been allowed to get in, and God just like completely moved a mountain, and I was accepted that year and moved out to Colorado Springs and spent a year learning under people from Desperation Worship, some of the most authentic and incredible pastors I've ever met. And just because it was really neat, one of the things they kept just pounding into us was, we're not we're not raising up song leaders, we're not raising up like karaoke singers, we're not raising up cover artists, we're raising up worship pastors. Like, your foremost priority is to be a pastor to these people.
That's
Like,
good.
your foremost priority is to love these people like Christ loved the church. If you're up there just to sing a gig because you have fun singing, then you probably came to the wrong place. And so part of our classes, like, we took theology classes, we took pastoral growth and ministry classes, as well as music theory and band performance and stuff like that. So it was really, really, um, it was refreshing, and that was where I really felt like God put that calling and affirmed that calling on my life, where I felt like this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I graduated, came back to Raleigh, and was ready to put my resume out there and be the next big worship leader. And I was going to write songs with Elevation Worship, who was doing crazy awesome things in 2011 and 12 and writing Give Me Faith and all that stuff. And so I was totally convinced that I was going to just I was 21, not even, and I was convinced I was going to be the next rock star worship
Yeah.
leader.
The world had
And
never seen anything like you
never
yet,
seen
right? Yeah,
anything
yeah.
like me. I had taken one songwriting class in School of Worship, and man, I was going to just show the world what I had to offer.
If it makes you
And
feel any better, I think that's every 21-year-old. It wasn't just you, so don't feel too bad
I
about that.
know. And so I started going out on interviews. I think I interviewed with a church in Portland, Oregon. I interviewed with a church in Arkansas, with a church in Durham, uh, all over the place. And they would fly me out. I'd lead worship. We'd get down to me and one other, and they would always go like, I'd get the call, we're really sorry, but we're taking it another direction, and they would go with the other person. And I lived in Raleigh for probably almost 3 years while I searched for a job, and um, I
What were
continued
you
to
doing in the meantime there? Like, what were you living
I
in Raleigh with your mom and dad, and like, what were you
I
doing?
lived
What
with
were you
my
doing for work?
parents. I lived with my parents, and so I was unofficially I was like the like assistant worship leader at our church. Like, whenever our worship leader would go and like visit family or go on a vacation, I would lead for the church, and I would always be up there every single Sunday. I would lead with him. Uh, but that was, purely volunteer. I did that on Sundays. I helped out with the youth worship
Okay,
on Sunday nights, and I also led a high school guys Bible study on Wednesday nights.
cool. And what did
And
you do like for work? What
yeah,
did you do
for
to make
work,
money?
work, yeah,
Yeah.
to actually make money.
What was your
I
real
did.
job?
Oh, yeah, I love that. That was like,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, it's so funny. My last church I was at in Iowa, I did a men's Bible study on Saturday mornings, and I didn't lead it. I participated in it, and that was one of the men who actually came to the church. He saw me up there leading worship every Sunday, and he leaned across the table and he was like, hey Zach, so what do you do? What's your
Yeah,
real job?
yeah,
And I was like, this is my real job.
yeah,
And he was like, oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, but yeah,
My
my real
father-in-law
job
asked me
back
that once.
then,
Yeah, my father-in-law asked me, so, like, what do you do for a living? And I was like,
I know.
well, he's like, I don't know how. And he even said, I just don't understand how you could make any money, working one day a week. And I was like, well, actually,
A
that's. And I told him, I said, that's sort of a stereotype, and I
little
didn't get
bit.
offended or whatever, but like that was, yeah, I know that's always out there.
That's my favorite is well, you basically just work on Sundays. It's like, oh, okay. But yeah, so my real job, let's see, I worked a lot of places over that 3 years. There was a guy at the church who owned his own plumbing business, so I was a plumbing assistant for better part of a year and a half.
What does a
And
plumbing assistant do?
it's a
I
pretty
know what a
crappy
plumber
job. I'm
does.
not gonna lie. It's a
Plumbing assistant sounds like you're the one actually getting your hands dirty, getting the plunger down
well,
in there.
I have been elbow deep in a toilet before. I will tell you that.
Okay, well, that's
It was it
oh,
was it was not
we
it was not
we,
super
we got to
fun,
go.
but
Thanks for joining us for this episode.
yeah,
We'll
signing
see.
off. But no,
Okay,
it
so
was actually
so you did odd jobs. You did odd jobs.
yeah, it was really fun though because I got to learn a lot of different stuff, how to hook up different appliances and actually lay down like water pipe and stuff that I never would have known otherwise. And so now I've been able to fix a lot of stuff around the house if it has to do with plumbing that I otherwise would have had no idea. I think he kind of wanted a protege. He wanted someone to like come in and like run the business with him, and that just after a year and a half, he just kind of came to me. It was actually the only job I've actually been fired from, and not because I like did anything bad or anything, but he just kind of came to me and said, "This isn't really what you want to do, is it?" And I was like, "It's a way to make money, you know. It was a good job for $12 an hour, so I took it." Um, but he was like, I see you, because he went to our church. He said, I see you leading worship up there on Sundays, and that's what you're meant to do. He's like, so I don't want to like. He's like, I want to look for someone who actually wants to do this. So it's probably better if we part ways. And we completely agreed. It wasn't. I still am friends with him today, love him to death. But I also worked at a couple restaurants while I was doing that. There was one point where I worked for the plumber. I opened up a gym for like the youth pastor who I worked under. He helped like work. He worked at a gym part time as well, and I would go open up the gym at like 4:30 in the morning and do like that 4:30 to like 7:30 shift where I just sat at the desk and tried to keep my eyes open. And so I worked part time at the gym with a plumber and at a restaurant. I was a host at like a pizza restaurant in the area, and then I ended up waiting tables for the last year and a half or so at a Chili's. Still love Chili's to this day.
That's why you like Chili's.
I
Yeah.
do. I do like
Remember when you
Chili's.
when you all when your parents were in, is before the quarantine hit, like that was the one place in town that you wanted to go. And it's like we
Well,
have we
but
have great restaurants in the Tri-Cities area, but you wanted to go to Chili's. I couldn't
I
figure it
wanted to
out.
go to
That's why.
Chili's. Well, because also then every place I've lived after that has not had a Chili's. So I've been Chili-less for several years.
Chililess.
Um, yes. So with all that going on, I was interviewing for jobs and stuff, and there was a job in Charlotte, and I had a couple of my buddies who were living in Charlotte who I was excited to. I'd already talked to them about moving in with them, and this church wanted me to come down and be like part-time worship leader with the hope of it turning into full-time, which that was pretty much as a 21 now 22-year old looking for, actually I was probably 23 at that point, looking for a job. That was pretty much the best offer I was getting for a guy with no college education looking for a job worship leading with no experience as well, because I hadn't, it's the catch 22 of trying to get a job. You need experience to get the job, but you need the job to get experience. And so I went down there for an interview, met with my friend, said the interview went really well, looking good. And then they actually called me down for a second interview. So I drove down to Charlotte again for a second interview. And at that point, one of my friends in Virginia kind of gave me a call and he said, "Hey, man, I'm getting married and we're moving to North Dakota or South Dakota. Don't know why anyone would ever move to the Dakotas. They're basically Antarctica. But he he was like, I'm leaving this job here, and it's only a 10-hour a week internship, but I think you do really well, and I think you'd really fit here. So I'm gonna give my boss your number. And I told him, I basically have this job in Charlotte in the bag. I'm gonna be in Elevation's backyard. I'm gonna be living with some of my musical buddies, and I'm gonna be writing all this music. So I didn't say all that, but I was basically just like, in my mind, I'm thinking like, I've got this, I'm good. Thanks though. And he said, well, I'm just gonna give him your number anyways. I said, okay, like not whatever, like cool. And expecting to get a call and being like, oh, sorry, but I have a job, because I was super pumped that I was gonna have a job. And after the second interview, I get a call about 4 or 5 days later, and the pastor said, sorry, Zach, but we're gonna take the job a different direction. And I was crushed. That was probably the third or fourth interview in that last like year span that had gone that way, and I
This
was
seems to be
just
there seems to be a theme here. Do you feel like that some of that was just like God humbling you almost? Because it sounds like you'd get a little bit of a oh, I'm going to have this, this is in the
mm-hmm,
bag, and then
yep.
boom, no, you don't. So do you feel like
I
that was
think
maybe looking back now? I mean, obviously it was
my
bad at the time, it hurt at the time. Do you feel like it was a process that God was taking you through in all of that?
I honestly think the last decade of my life has been a process of God humbling me. I've never been one really to have a huge head or a huge ego. I really don't think that I'm all that in a bag of chips. Um, but I guess I would get so overconfident and so excited. I would almost like kind of like looking a gift horse in the mouth. Like I would see what I wanted and be like, oh, I would be so hopeful for it that then when I got let down, I would just be crushed. And there was a guy, his name's Kyle Doss, really dear friend of mine that I was actually leading a high school guys Bible study with, and we were kind of talking through curriculum that we were teaching in like different lessons, because we would actually like meet on Wednesdays and kind of write up what we wanted to teach the guys, and we would go through scripture with them. And I was just kind of we would kind of have our own little accountability session, and I was just kind of venting to him one day, and I was just like, I'm just so frustrated. This is probably about a year before I got the job in Virginia, and I was just so frustrated. And he said, hey man, he said something that someone told me a long time ago, and I feel like it applies to you right now. And he said, you remember when Samuel in the Bible came to anoint David as king? And I was like, yeah. He went through all of Jesse's sons, like, and Jesse had apparently some super tall, super strong sons. And Samuel's going to each one saying, this is it? Yeah. And God's like, no. And he's like, no, but this one for sure. And God's saying, no, no. And he finally gets to the end and he's like, do you have any more sons? Because God didn't like any of these. And he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I have my son David. He's out in the field watching the sheep. And he brings him in, and God says yes. And he anoints him on the spot as king of Israel. But in that moment, did David actually ascend the throne and take his kingdom? And he was like, no, he didn't. He said, even though he was anointed and he knew exactly what God had called him to and exactly what his purpose was, he went straight back to the fields and he spent time in the pastures. And he said, never look down on the time that you spend in the pastures. And that was really the word that got me through that last year, was like, I don't I don't need to be just kind of turning my nose up at time spent in the pastures when that may be exactly where God wants me. And so I ended up getting that call from Charlotte saying, sorry, but we're going with someone else. And the next day, um, my buddy's boss from Virginia called me and was like, hey man, let's get you up here for an interview. And at that point, I just kind of threw my hands up and was like, okay, God, whatever you want to do, I'm not going to
Wow.
fight anymore.
Wow.
And I went up there and they ended up hiring me just about on the spot. And I went from a 10-hour a week intern to part-time job to a little more part-time. I kind of took over the youth group for about 3 months while they were looking for a youth group, for a youth pastor. Went to full-time youth and worship, and then by the last year, I actually ended up leading worship at a campus for them. They were a larger church, about 2,000 in the Roanoke, Virginia area, and I ended up being a worship leader for one of their campuses, which was really neat. And during that time, I guess I'll have to rewind to talk about Candace, because
Yeah, I was
I
going to say, like,
actually
when does Candace come into the picture?
I
I thought that was
so
around this
Candace
time. Yeah.
Candace was actually, I met her when I was 18. So I graduated high school and I was about to go to Appalachian State University. And there was this camp that my mom had always wanted me to go to. It's called Living Waters. It's an amazing camp in Brevard, North Carolina. It's up on top of a mountain. Like it's literally on top of a mountain in the Pisgah National Forest. And it is actually like a national rainforest where Pisgah National Forest is. It's actually, it rains so much there, it's considered a rainforest. Um, it's it's really really rainy there all the time. But so we went to this camp. Well, I went to this camp, and she had been going to this camp since she was a little kid. Her parents went there because they have like couples retreats, they have men's retreats and women's retreats all throughout the year, and it's just kind of a love offering, like a pay whatever you can, and really 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 cool ministry. I absolutely love the people who run that camp, and it was just a really neat place. And my mom was like, I want you to go to this camp, because at that point when I grew up I was a Boy Scout, and so up until 16 I had been working on getting my Eagle Scout. So while all my friends were going off to like church camps and stuff, I was going to Boy Scout camp. And so I had gone to one of my youth group summer camps one time. And so my mom was like, I want you to go to Living Waters, you need to go. And so I went up there. You spend the whole week without your phone, which nowadays would be unheard of, but 10 years ago it was like, well, we don't have reception up here anyway, so what are we going to do? um, so at the end of the week, you get your phone back, you get everything, parents are coming to pick you up. And so everyone would run around with a piece of paper, and they would go, write down your name and number, like write down your Facebook, like we're going to be friends forever after this week we spent together. And then you really keep in touch with like two of them uh, for a year, and then you never speak again. And so somehow Candace's name and number ended up on my sheet of paper. We had spoken to each other maybe two times that week. uh, I think when I was standing behind her during worship one night, and she turned around and said, "I think you have a really good voice," and then turned back around. That
Oh,
was the
hang
extent
on,
of our.
hang on, hang on. Now,
But that was the extent
we
of our
all know.
interaction.
No, no, no. We know what that means at church camp. When a girl says, "Oh, I love your voice," that means for the Christian girl, Christian camp, that means she's into you, buddy. That's what that
But
means.
see, I was 18 years old and completely oblivious and unaware of myself, and so I was just like, "Thanks," and just moved on, just
Yeah, that
completely
sounds like a
like
boy.
blew
Yeah.
blew past it. Yeah, I was fairly oblivious. And if we're able to, I might throw up an old picture when we when we put this. But my
I
hair
mean,
was pretty rough. I
that's almost a marriage proposal in a
Yes,
Christian camp.
just about,
For a girl
just
to
about.
turn around, say that, "Oh, you have a nice voice," or "I like your voice," because everybody knows. See, I never did the Christian camp thing either growing
Uh
up, but
huh.
I knew I had friends who did, and
Yeah.
like everybody was like finding their forever partner there,
Uh
right?
huh.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
and we're gonna, you'd have your camp girlfriend or boyfriend, and like, oh, we're in love, and God brought us
Exactly. It's like
together, and
it's
we're
like a
gonna be
Disney
together.
Channel
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the Disney Channel movie where the 13-year-old finds true love and is going to be together forever. Yeah. So actually, we get the oh, her number ended up on my sheet of paper. And so you're sitting in the car right on the way home with your like flip phone, and you're like entering in all the numbers and like names and numbers and names. And then I just like, there was a couple guys I kept up with, a couple of girls I kept up with and talked with for the next year or so, and I never talked with her because we hadn't really talked that much that year of camp. And so, but as I got new phones and as the years went by, I guess contacts just got switched over and switched over. And 5 years later, in 2015, I was
So
living in
had you okay? So
Virginia.
this five we're going 5 years into the future now.
Yes.
Had you guys kept in touch at all? Had you texted,
Zero.
called? Wow. Okay, but you still
Zero.
have her contact
I
information in your
I
phone.
think we were Facebook friends, but it was one of those
Okay.
Facebook friends that you live so far apart and you have so few mutual friends with that they don't even really show up in your news feed or anything. So
Right. Right.
I so there's this app called Voxer, and it's like a push to talk kind of app, like a walkie-talkie app, kind of like HeyTel was back in 2010. And So we both had Voxer on our phone without knowing it. And if you allow those apps to have access to your contacts, it'll kind of like pop up little notifications and it'll be like, oh, hey, so and so also has Voxer. You should talk to them. And that's what happened. So she was in the back of a Sally's Beauty Supply shop where she was basically running the store because the manager was embezzling money from the company, but that's another story. Um, and she had her phone out and it was just on the counter and it kind of buzzed and it said, Zach's on Voxer. You should talk to him. Because apparently the app was super intrusive into people's personal lives and it would be like, hey, you should talk to this person. And she kind of looked and she's not ever been one to go out of her way to talk to guys or be like the person who makes like a first move. And so she just kind of pressed the button and went, hey. And I'm sitting in my room.
Just hey.
Just hey. Literally
She
just
didn't
said,
say like, "Hey,
hey.
I know it's been 5 years, but I
Nope.
still remember your voice behind
Nope.
me in the worship
Yeah.
service.
No, that's
It
the
was
best
so
part is
beautiful."
she didn't remember me. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's not as nice.
it was a little disappointing, not gonna lie. So I get this Voxer, this little voicemail thing, and it just says, hey. And my first thought in my mind is like, why is the hot girl from camp messaging me? Like, why? Like, I remember this girl. I remember who she was. She was the popular girl that everyone liked and everyone had a crush on. Like, why is she talking to me?
Really? So she
And
was popular at camp?
well, the thing
She,
is, her dad was on the board of elders for the camp, and her
oh,
mom
okay.
would
So
come up
everybody
for a
kind of knew
couple of.
her. You,
And
wow. So
also
it really is like a Disney Channel movie.
it really is. It
Yeah.
really is, man. My life is basically a Disney Channel movie. We're living it out. We're watching it unfold.
The popular
But
girl at camp, the shy, boy with the
musician.
nice voice. Yeah, the shy musician, and they just come together. There's a few bumps along the way, right? Like, but yeah, okay, cool, cool.
Indeed. So and also the thing is like the woman who owns most of the camp. Her grandson's name is Zach, and he was at camp with us. And one of the counselors, or one of the guys who I went to camp with, his name was also Zach. There were like 3 Zachs at that camp. So I'm thinking for sure this girl found someone on Voxer who she thinks is a Zach she knows from camp. And this is a big mistake and will just be yet another disappointing bump in the road in my attempt at romance. So I just pick up the phone and I press the little button on the Voxer thing and I go, hey, and and I just let that be. And she messaged back pretty quickly because you can, when you're both in the app, you can kind of talk like it's a walkie-talkie, like hold and talk and let go and hold and talk. So she talked and she said, what you doing? I said, I'm just having a lazy Friday morning. I still remember it was March 6th, 2015, a Friday morning, and I was sitting in my bed,
Wow,
like
what a romantic
probably
you are. You're so
probably
romantic.
watching Netflix. I know I am. And I just said, I'm just having a lazy Friday morning. Do you know who this is? And just let it go at that. And she was like, yeah, we're Facebook friends and we follow each other. And I saw that you sing. Apparently she had seen like a video that I posted because I used to like do covers of songs and stuff. And so she was like, I saw that you sing and I sing too. And I just wanted to say hi. And so now my mind's like, yeah, but do you actually okay. And so I picked up, I said, yeah, but do you know where you know me from? And she said, no. I was like, oh, I was like, you don't remember me? And she was like, I'm sorry, I don't remember you. And I was like, I can't believe you don't remember. I milked it for all it was worth. And she goes, no, like, where do we know each other from? And I said, you don't remember Living Waters?
And then it all came back to her. And she
Yes, it all
remembered.
came
She
back to her.
remembered
And the
that
next,
beautiful voice behind her that just sent shivers up her spine and made her feel so close to God in that moment.
oh,
And she
no.
remembered.
And
She remembered Zach.
the next Voxer message was, oh my God, that was you. And I was like, all right, yep, strike 3. That's it for me. Because I also was some guys have like had like the really cool hair back in the day. Like I'm super hair envy of you all the time because love your hair. But I
Yeah, it's
used to have a lot of hair, but I didn't know what to do with it. If I ran like a comb through it and just combed it up, it would like poof. It was poofy. I didn't know what product was nor how to use it, and I had a very unfortunate hair phase from about 17 to 19. And so that was the phase in which I met her. So I'm thinking like, there's no way this girl thought I was cute at all, ever. No way. And so we just started talking, and it's funny because like on Voxer, on that app, you can also text. It's like Snapchat where you can take a picture, but you can also like text them and message them. You could use the walkie-talkie feature, but you could also text. And so I was like, well, hey, just text me your number and I'll give you a call at some point, because I genuinely wanted to get to know this girl. And she texted me her number on Voxer, and so I copied it and pasted it into my phone. And when I pasted it, her name came up, and her name and number had been in my phone for 5 years, and we had just never talked. So that is the great love story of Zach and Candace. We dated long distance. I took her out to Colorado and proposed on top of Pikes Peak, and then married her in June.
Wow. Okay. So it moved pretty fast after that.
Not sorry, not that June. We dated for a year
Oh, okay. Okay.
before,
Yeah.
before I proposed, and then another
Hmm.
year, and we got married.
Wow. Wow. That's great. And then when did you guys have the twins? How long was
So
that?
that so that was in Iowa. So I guess we got we got engaged and married while I was in Virginia. And then when we got married, kind of right before we got married, she moved up to Virginia and actually lived with the couple that I lived with when I was an intern at the church. And so she lived with them while I got our apartment ready. And then we moved into the apartment, and it was just one of those things. We were very close to family. We were very, like, not very close, but we were like 3 hours away from my parents, 6 hours away from hers. And the place that I was at, I had been there and I had been established for years. And through various things, through God just kind of calling us and kind of nudging us and prodding us, we both kind of felt like we needed a place where we could both start fresh, where we could both have our own, like, we could be established as a couple, not as like Zach
Sure.
and Zach's wife, because that's
Right.
kind of how it was at first. And so we ended up, I was super scared because, as you know, my previous story with looking for a job, I looked for about 3 years, and then I got a 10-hour a week internship. So I put my resume out there, and I was talking to Candace. I was like, babe, I'll put my resume out there, but don't hold your breath, because it was like 3 years before I found a job last time. And I put my resume out on October 1st, my birthday, the beginning of October. And by the end of October, we had accepted a position.
Wow.
And yeah, we ended up moving out to Iowa in the
Sort of
beginning of
a
November.
sort of a God's timing thing, huh? Like
It
it's like
was
it wasn't
100% God's
happening. It
timing.
wasn't happening for so long for you, right? But then you met Candace, and then you guys got married, and then it was
So
right. Like
basically, all this to say is Candace just made my life infinitely better, and still does to this day.
oh, good job. That's very good. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll be sure to paste that clip to her Facebook
Yes.
page. I'll edit it, copy paste just that part.
Solid.
Yeah. We won't talk about the part where you sent shivers up her spine because of your
Yeah.
beautiful
No.
voice.
Probably
It can't go there.
not.
Yeah. No,
But
that's great. That's cool.
so we moved out to Iowa, and it's very cold there. And yeah, we moved in November, so it was quite cold when we moved. Um, and so we had been there probably 4 or 5 months, and we actually got pregnant in like March or so. And we were very excited, ready to start a family. Um, and we actually had a miscarriage our first pregnancy, and that was we had an amazing church family that walked with us through it, even though we barely knew them. We had only been there a few months. And you can love people who you've just met, who are your church family, but it takes a little while for those relationships to really take root and
Yeah. Yeah.
really have that deep meaningful. And so it was really hard for us. It was very disappointing and heart-wrenching all at the same time. And we weren't expecting to get pregnant again very soon after, but we did. And it was so funny. So I had Mondays off, in Iowa. And so we slept in on Monday, and it was her first ultrasound for the pregnancy that we had with the twins. And she woke up and she kind of rolled over and looked at me and said, I had a weird dream last night. And I said, oh, yeah? Like, tell me about it. And she said, well, I had a dream that we were in the ultrasound tech room, and the ultrasound tech was looking at the ultrasound, and she said, huh, it looks like there's two in there. And I looked back at her and I said, that is funny. And and
This was a dream she had the night before.
the night before. And so
Oh.
we went to the appointment, and they started to do the ultrasound like they do it over the stomach, and they they had to do another type of ultrasound because she was too early along for them to tell. But she's like, we'll have to do another ultrasound in a second, but it looks like there's two in there. Like literally word for word said the phrase that Candace heard in her dream, and I just looked at her and went, "You're kidding?" And she's like, "No, it looks like there's two in there." And I was like, "Okay." And then they did the other ultrasound, and there were two little babies in there.
Wow. So when Candace has weird dreams, you better pay attention.
I pay attention. Yeah, when she has weird dreams, I pay attention. Um, so we actually, it was really fun. We did like a gender reveal at the church on Sunday. We had two services, so we announced one baby at the end of each service. It was really fun. It was
That's
really
great.
fun. And so it was funny because we didn't find out. We had the ultrasound lady find out the genders and put them in an envelope, and we gave it to the pastor's wife, and so that we would be surprised too. And Candace is like, yeah, I'm not doing that with this one, Zach. I can't. She hates surprises. She hates surprises. So she was like, I want to know in the room as soon as they know. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that's fair.
Yeah.
That is fair.
My wife is like that too. She does not like spontaneous anything. It is very much like, I need to know the plan. I need to know what's going on. I've tried to surprise her with like presents and stuff, or,
Uh-huh.
like, hey, it's the weekend. It's the day off. Like, let's just go out somewhere. Where are we
Yeah.
going? Like,
Yeah.
where?
What are we
I need to
doing?
know where. I was like, no,
What's
I
the
just want to
plan?
surprise you. No, I need to know.
No, what are we doing?
Yeah, I understand.
It's a little odd how similar our wives are.
I know we joked around when you guys, came and we had that weekend together where you guys were down here interviewing that we came to, by the end of that weekend, think, oh, they're pretty much the same person.
More or less.
Personality wise, they're like, it's like their brains work exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, that's awesome. So, and then, so that's the story of Mava and Zeke.
Yes.
But now you guys just put it's okay to say there's a Facebook post
Yes.
that went up this
Yes,
week,
it
and
is.
there's some more news. Anybody who didn't see that Facebook post, would you like to share it here?
Yeah, we are. Candace and I are pregnant with number 3 right now. It is just one. It is just one. So, um,
please, just one.
man, oh man, when we found out we were pregnant, Candace, her first gut reaction was, "What if it's twins again?" And I was just like, "Oh no!" I love my children more than just about anything else on this world, but having 4 under 2 might have been a little tough.
Yeah,
I
having
mean,
3 under
3
2
under
is going to
2
be tough.
is it's gonna be tough, but
Having 1 under 2 is tough. You
yeah,
guys, it just doubles up, right? Just
it
exponentially.
does. It does. It's just so
Wow.
funny. We were even talking, and it was like, what are we gonna do with ourselves? Because we've only ever known having twins, so it's like having only one little baby to take care of. Like, granted, not that we're still gonna have 2 almost 2-year-olds at that point, but only having one infant, because we always we each had a baby. Like Candace had a baby, and I had a baby. And so she's like, it's just going to be like only one of us is going to have to hold it. And I was like, that's going to be weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it'll be
Hmm.
fun. We're really, really excited. We're really looking
Oh,
forward to it.
we're
we're going to
so
do
excited for you.
we're going to do like a Facebook poll, like one of those polls where you can choose like true or false or yes or no. And we'll do a gender, like a gender guess, so we can let people guess what they think. I'm thinking it's a boy. That's just what I think and
Hmm. Hmm.
what I think I want, but I'll be happy with whatever.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, I was super glad that she did finally post it on Facebook, because you guys told us pretty quick, like right after
We
you
did.
found out. And I was petrified for like the last 3 months or however long it's been. I was
You were gonna let it
petrified that
slip.
I was going to say something. I was going to let it out and like totally ruin the surprise. And Candace was
Probably
going to be
better that we
mad
haven't
at
been
me.
at church.
I know. I was just like, oh my goodness. I was petrified that like I was going to really upset Candace by accidentally letting that information out. So I'm super glad that it's out there now. And all
Oh,
that
that's
pressure's off.
funny. Well, we
I literally had moments where like I was about to say something in conversation with someone for church, and I had to be like, wait a second. I don't think they've told
I
anyone
can't
yet.
say that.
Shut up.
I can't say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because we found out the evening that we got back from the interview.
Right.
And it's
Right. Yeah.
and it's funny because we had a little like a little are we not before. Candace was like kind of feeling a little sick and was like, I don't know, this doesn't feel normal, I feel like I'm pregnant. And I was like, well, it's not like we were not trying. And so I was like, well, let's get you a pregnancy test. And so we had like a little list of groceries that we were going to swing by the store and get when we got to Tennessee. And so she had that on the list, like get a couple pregnancy tests. But we actually got one before we left town. And so we got one before we left town. She took it and it was negative. And so we were like, okay, whew, like I'm not pregnant. Like it's okay. Nothing to get prepared for or get excited for yet. So but she didn't take it off the list. And so my parents came out to Tennessee for the interview weekend so that they could watch Zeke and Maves while we were going to practices and appointments and meetings and stuff. And so my parents got there the night that we got there, and my mom was looking over Candace's shoulder at the grocery list, seeing if she needed to add anything. And she was like, she was like milk, like yogurt, applesauce, pregnancy test, Candace. And Candace was like, no, 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 it's fine. We already took one. It was a little like we thought we were, but we're not. And we 100% told them like it's okay, we're not. And then the night we got back to Iowa, she came out of the bathroom and was like, we're pregnant. I was like, no, we're not. She's like, yeah, we are. I was like, no. She's like, yes. It's like, and so we had to go back and tell my parents, like, so remember when we told you that we weren't? Well,
Wow. We are actually. We didn't lie.
I didn't lie. The pregnancy test did. So,
Wow. Well,
yeah,
man, that's awesome. That's
it
awesome.
is. We're really, really excited.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I think that's great for our first chat
Yeah,
together. I'll cut us off here. I have some more questions about ministry specifically, but we'll break that up. We'll
absolutely.
break that out into a second video here, and so people can listen and watch on their own time. So, anything else you want to say to anybody before we sign off?
Yeah, sign off. I don't think so. I don't think so. I can't even express how excited Candace and I are to really get to meet with you in person, for you guys to all get to know our whole family. We're really, really, really excited.
I know everybody at the church is excited, and if anybody in our community just happens to be watching this on Facebook and you don't have a church home, I can't wait for you to get to meet Zach. We have a little saying around KCC that if you don't have a church home, you have one here. You have one at
Hmm.
KCC. So we'd love to see you, and we're all back together soon. And of course, you can always watch all of our stuff. Our services are live on Facebook every Sunday morning at facebook.com/kportchurch. That's at 10:45 in the morning. And all throughout the week, we have different videos that we post there just to kind of, create some engagement and community during this unprecedented time that we're living in right now. We're doing a lot more
Yeah.
online, and we hope that it's a blessing to you. So, Zach, thanks so much for joining us. And I will talk to you in like 30 seconds.
Sounds
But
good.
but whenever anybody else is watching this, they'll see you next time. How about that?
Yeah.
All right. God bless you, buddy. Thanks.
See ya.